The transport ship cut through the darkness of space like a knife through black water. Inside the cramped passenger bay, Specialist Han Mira checked her equipment one final time. Her rifle lay disassembled in its case, each piece carefully cleaned and inspected. The weapon had been her companion for 5 years now, through 17 different missions across 12 different worlds. 10 minutes to drop zone, called the pilot through the intercom. His voice carried the usual tension that came with flying into enemy territory. The hegemony forces controlled most of this sector, and their fighters had been getting bolder lately. Mira stood and began putting on her combat suit. The advanced armor was painted in shifting patterns that would blend with almost any environment. Built into the fabric were thousands of tiny sensors that could analyze the surrounding area and adjust the suit's color and texture accordingly. It was like wearing a chameleon's skin. Captain Lee Dongyun watched her preparations with quiet respect. He had seen many soldiers come and go, but Mira was different. She moved with the calm confidence of someone who had never failed a mission. Her dark eyes held a focus that made even veteran soldiers uncomfortable. "The target zone is hot," Dongyun said, reviewing the tactical display. "Hegemony forces have been building up their defenses for months. Intelligence counts at least 3,000 enemy troops in the mountain complex." Mira nodded but didn't speak. She was already shifting into mission mode, her mind calculating distances and angles. The planet below was called Kepler 442b by human scientists, but the locals called it Broken Sky because of its strange twin suns. The hegemony had chosen it as a staging ground for their push toward Earth's outer colonies. The alien race known as the hegemony looked like walking lizards, but they were far from primitive. Their technology was advanced, their military disciplined, and their expansion across the galaxy had been swift and brutal. They had conquered 47 different species in the last century. Humanity was supposed to be number 48. "Remember the mission parameters," Dongyun continued. "High-value targets only. We need to disrupt their command structure without triggering a full-scale response." Mira finally spoke, her voice quiet but clear. "I understand, sir. Create confusion, not war." The transport shuddered as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Through the small viewport, Mira could see the alien landscape rolling past below. Dense forests covered most of the continent, broken up by rocky mountain ranges that jutted into the purple sky. The hegemony had built their fortress in the highest peaks, using the elevation to coordinate their planetary invasion. 2 minutes, announced the pilot. Mira moved to the deployment bay and activated her suit's camouflage system. The armor shimmered and changed, matching the gray metal walls around her. To an observer, she would appear as little more than a shadow with eyes. The landing was perfect. The transport touched down in a small clearing 15 kilometers from the enemy complex, and Mira slipped out like smoke. Before the pilot had even finished powering down the engines, she had vanished into the forest. Moving through alien wilderness required different skills than Earth forests. The trees here grew in spiral patterns, their blue-green leaves filtering the light from the twin suns into an eerie glow. Strange creatures called out from the canopy above, but Mira had studied the local wildlife during her journey. None of them posed a real threat to a prepared human. She made good time through the dense undergrowth. Her suit's sensors constantly fed her information about the terrain ahead, marking safe paths and potential hazards. After 3 hours of steady movement, she reached her first observation post, a rocky outcrop that offered a clear view of the hegemony fortress. The alien complex was impressive. Massive walls rose from the mountainside like natural rock formations, but Mira's trained eye could see the weapon emplacements and sensor arrays built into the stone. Guard towers sprouted from the walls at regular intervals, each one manned by soldiers in the distinctive blue armor of the hegemony military. Mira set up her rifle and began studying the fortress through her scope. The weapon was a marvel of human engineering, capable of accurate shots at distances that would have been impossible just a generation ago. More importantly, it was completely silent. The electromagnetic propulsion system made no sound, and the projectiles left no visible trail. Her first target appeared after 2 hours of patient observation. A hegemony officer emerged onto one of the observation platforms, his armor marked with the golden stripes that indicated high rank. Through her scope, Mira could see him gesturing to subordinates, clearly giving orders about the fortress defenses. She steadied her breathing and aligned the crosshairs. The shot would be challenging. nearly 800 meters through shifting air currents. But Mira had made harder shots before. She squeezed the trigger with the gentle pressure her instructors had drilled into her during endless training sessions. The projectile flew straight and true. The alien officer dropped instantly, his body crumpling behind the platform's protective barrier. His subordinates looked around in confusion, clearly unsure what had happened to their commander. Mira was already moving. She broke down her rifle with practiced efficiency and began relocating to her second position. The first rule of sniper warfare was simple: never shoot from the same place twice. Her second hiding spot was a grove of twisted trees that offered multiple escape routes. From here, she could observe a different section of the fortress and wait for her next opportunity. The aliens were already responding to their officer's death, but their search patterns were predictable. They looked for threats at ground level, not suspecting that death could come from the distant mountainside. The second kill came just before sunset. Another officer, this one wearing the distinctive helmet of a communications specialist. Mira's shot took him down as he was coordinating with units across the planet. The loss of such a crucial position would create chaos in their command network. As darkness fell over the alien world, Mira melted back into the wilderness. Behind her, the fortress erupted into activity as the hegemony forces tried to understand what was happening to their leadership. They had no idea that their war against humanity had just entered a new phase. 2 weeks had passed since Mira first stepped foot on the alien world. In that time, she had become something that haunted the nightmares of every hegemony soldier in the mountain fortress. They called her many things in their strange language, but the human translators had settled on one name that captured their fear: the Silent Phantom. Lieutenant Colonel Park Jun-hyuk read the latest intelligence reports from his command post in orbit. The numbers were almost impossible to believe. 47 confirmed kills, all high-ranking targets with 0 friendly casualties. The enemy communications they had intercepted spoke of a supernatural being that could appear anywhere and strike without warning. Down on the planet's surface, Mira moved through her carefully planned routine. She had established 6 different observation posts throughout the mountain range, each one hidden so well that even advanced alien sensors could not detect them. Each hiding spot contained emergency supplies, backup weapons, and ammunition that could last for weeks. The key to her success was not just her shooting skills, though those were exceptional. It was her ability to think like the enemy. Mira had spent months studying hegemony military doctrine, learning their customs and understanding their rigid command structure. The aliens were creatures of habit who followed the same patterns even under extreme stress. When a senior officer died, his replacement would always visit the same strategic locations within 2 days. It was part of their military tradition, a way of honoring the fallen and asserting new authority. Mira would be waiting at those locations, invisible and patient as death itself. Her longest successful shot had come on the 14th day. A hegemony general had emerged from a heavily protected bunker, thinking himself safe behind multiple layers of security. Mira had calculated the exact moment when automated defense systems would cycle through their patrol routines, creating a gap just 37 seconds long. The shot traveled 2,847 meters through shifting mountain winds before finding its target. The general never knew what killed him. Captain Kim Si-woo monitored the situation from the main battle cruiser, watching as the alien fleet began implementing increasingly desperate countermeasures. They had started using only automated drones for reconnaissance missions. No officer would leave the fortress without a full escort of bodyguards. Some had refused to leave their bunkers at all. The psychological impact was spreading beyond just the fortress. Intercepted communications from other hegemony worlds spoke of similar phantom sightings. The aliens could not understand that these were different human operatives using similar techniques. To their rigid minds, it had to be the same supernatural entity appearing across multiple star systems at once. Mira adapted to their changing tactics with the patience of a master predator. When they stopped sending officers outside, she began targeting their automated systems instead. Her rifle could fire special electromagnetic pulse rounds that disabled drone networks and communication relays. Each disruption created opportunities for Alliance ground forces to advance their positions. The fortress had become a prison for its own defenders. Soldiers jumped at shadows and fired at moving branches. Sleep-deprived sentries reported seeing the phantom moving through their perimeter at night. Mass hallucinations spread through the ranks as fear took hold of even the most disciplined troops. Sergeant Major Cho Hanna led the Psychological Warfare Division from a hidden base in the nearby valleys. Her job was to monitor enemy morale and assess the effectiveness of phantom operations. The results exceeded all expectations. Enemy desertion rates had increased by 300% in areas where the phantom was reportedly active. But Mira's greatest achievement came during her infiltration of the Central Command bunker. Using maintenance tunnels that the aliens considered too small for human occupation, she positioned herself directly beneath their main planning chamber. The space was cramped and filled with alien machinery, but it gave her access to their most secret meetings. For 6 hours, she recorded their strategic discussions while remaining completely undetected. The aliens spoke freely about troop movements, supply lines, and planned attacks on human colonies. They had no idea that their greatest enemy was listening to every word just meters below their feet. The recording session ended when their Supreme Field Commander entered the chamber for a private briefing. Mira had been waiting for this opportunity for days. Through a carefully calculated shot fired through a ventilation grate, she eliminated the most important target on the entire planet. The death of their Supreme Commander sent shockwaves through the entire hegemony military structure. Within hours, conflicting orders were being issued by different officers who each claimed authority. Units began moving in circles as the chain of command collapsed. Dr. An Ji-young studied the psychological profiles of captured hegemony soldiers from her research station on a distant moon. Her findings painted a picture of an alien military force on the edge of complete breakdown. The Phantom had become more than just a sniper. She was a symbol of human persistence and ingenuity that the aliens could not comprehend or counter. The recordings Mira had gathered provided alliance, forces with complete intelligence about hegemony, plans for the next month. Every troop movement, every supply convoy, every strategic target was now known to human commanders. It was like having a map of the enemy's mind. As the third week began, Mira prepared for the next phase of her mission. The fortress was now effectively neutralized, its command structure in ruins and its troops too demoralized to mount effective operations. But intelligence suggested that other hegemony strongholds were still active on different parts of the planet. The silent phantom would not rest until every enemy commander knew the price of threatening human space. In the darkness of the alien night, she gathered her equipment and began planning her next hunt. The war was far from over, but the enemy had learned an important lesson. Humans did not fight like other species. They brought creativity, adaptability, and a cold determination that could turn any advantage against itself. The hegemony had thought they were facing just another primitive species ripe for conquest. They were learning how wrong they had been. The legend of the silent phantom had spread far beyond the mountains of Kepler 442b. Major Kim Siwoo monitored reports from across the galaxy as similar mysterious attacks began appearing on other contested worlds. The hegemony leadership was struggling to understand how their deadliest enemy could be in multiple places at once. From his command center aboard the orbital station, Siwoo watched the alien fleet implement new security protocols. They had pulled warships from 3 different star systems to provide additional protection for their remaining strongholds. Resources meant for offensive operations were now being wasted on defensive measures against a single human soldier. The truth was more remarkable than the aliens could imagine. Mira had become the template for a new kind of warfare. Her techniques were being studied by military academies across human space. Select personnel were being trained in her methods and deployed to battlefields throughout the galaxy. On Proxima Centauri B, Specialist Yun Taewon had eliminated an entire hegemony command staff during their weekly planning meeting. His shot had traveled through supposedly unbreakable armor glass from over 4 kilometers away. The aliens still could not explain how their most secure facility had been compromised. Meanwhile, on Wolf 359C, another phantom operative had infiltrated a hegemony space station. Over 3 days, she had systematically eliminated every member of their intelligence division without triggering a single alarm. The bodies were discovered only when the next shift arrived and found empty workstations. Dr. An Ji-young published her research on what military psychologists were calling the phantom phenomenon. Her classified study revealed that hegemony forces were experiencing collective fear, responses so severe that their combat effectiveness had dropped by an average of 40%. across all theaters where phantom activity was reported. Back on Keplat Bay, Mira continued her deadly work. She had moved beyond the mountain fortress to target hegemony operations across the entire continent. Her new hunting ground was a series of supply depots and communication centers that the aliens had thought were safely hidden in remote valleys. The Phantom's tactics had evolved as well. Instead of just eliminating individual targets, she began orchestrating complex operations that maximized psychological impact. A supply convoy would find its guards dead at their posts, killed silently in the night with no sign of the attacker. Communications outposts would go dark one by one, their operators vanishing without explanation. Commander Yun Tae-wan received regular updates on Phantom operations from his position with the main fleet. The reports read like something from a horror story rather than military dispatches. Enemy soldiers were abandoning their posts, claiming they had seen ghostly figures moving through their camps. Some units had simply disappeared entirely, leaving behind only empty equipment and unanswered radio calls. The hegemony response became increasingly desperate. They began using only automated systems for patrol duties, refusing to risk organic personnel in areas where phantom activity had been reported. But this played directly into human strategic advantages. Automated systems were predictable and could be hacked or disabled by properly trained specialists. Mira's greatest challenge came when she decided to target the planetary communication hub, a massive facility built into the side of an active volcano. The location provided natural protection from conventional attacks, and the hegemony had surrounded it with their most advanced defensive systems. The infiltration took 2 weeks of careful planning and preparation. Mira had to study the volcanic activity patterns, map the facility's internal structure through long-range sensors, and identify weaknesses in their security protocols. The alien defenders never suspected that their enemy was already watching them from the lava flows above. Her approach came through the volcanic vents themselves. Using specialized heat-resistant equipment, Mira descended through natural lava tubes that brought her directly into the facility's lower levels. The aliens had never considered that a human would be crazy enough to use an active volcano as an infiltration route. Once inside, she moved like a ghost through corridors filled with alien technology. Her suit's camouflage systems worked even better in the artificial environment, making her nearly invisible to both organic and electronic detection. The facility's guards were focused on external threats, never imagining that death was already walking among them. The elimination of the communication hub's command staff took less than an hour. Mira moved from room to room, silently dispatching officers and technicians with precision strikes from her sidearm. By the time the facility's automated systems detected the intrusion, she was already extracting through the same volcanic vents she had used to enter. The loss of planetary communications created chaos throughout the hegemony's local operations. Units lost contact with their commanders, supply convoys missed their scheduled check-ins, and defensive positions could not coordinate their responses to human attacks. It was like cutting the nervous system of a giant creature. Colonel Nam Yunseo coordinated the follow-up operations from Alliance headquarters. With hegemony communications crippled, human forces could move freely across previously contested territory. What had been planned as a months-long campaign was compressed into a matter of weeks. But the most significant impact was on hegemony morale across the galaxy. News of the communication hub's fall spread through their military networks like wildfire. If the Phantom could penetrate their most secure facility and eliminate an entire command structure without being detected, nowhere was truly safe. Mira herself remained focused on the mission parameters. Intelligence suggested that the hegemony was preparing to evacuate their remaining forces from Kepler 442b. But they still had one major installation that posed a threat to human shipping lanes. The orbital defense platform had to be neutralized before the aliens could regroup elsewhere. The platform presented a unique challenge. Unlike ground-based targets, it could not be approached through stealth and patience. Instead, Mira would need to think like her enemy and find weaknesses in their most advanced defensive systems. As she prepared for what might be her most dangerous mission yet, reports continued to arrive from across human space. The Phantom program was succeeding beyond all expectations, turning the tide of war through fear and psychological warfare rather than massive fleet battles. The silent Phantom had become more than just a soldier. She was proof that humans could adapt and overcome any challenge, no matter how impossible it seemed. The war had entered a new phase that no military strategist had predicted. Admiral Song Mi-hyun reviewed intelligence reports from 17 different star systems, each one telling the same impossible story. Hegemony forces were withdrawing not because of military defeats, but because their command structures could no longer function under constant fear of phantom attacks. The orbital defense platform above, Kepler 442b, represented the aliens' last major stronghold in the system. From her position on the planet's surface, Mira studied the massive structure through long-range sensors. The platform was a technological marvel, bristling with weapons and protected by energy shields that could deflect anything short of a direct hit from a battleship. But Mira had learned that every fortress had weaknesses if you understood how the defenders thought. The hegemony built their installations to repel conventional attacks from enemy fleets. They never considered that their greatest threat might come from a single infiltrator, with patience and creativity. The solution came from studying the platform's supply schedule. Like all military installations, it required regular shipments of food, ammunition, and replacement parts. The cargo vessels that serviced the platform were thoroughly scanned for weapons and explosives, but the aliens had no protocols for detecting a human stowaway. Infiltrating a hegemony supply ship required weeks of preparation. Mira had to intercept a cargo vessel in deep space, eliminate its crew without damaging critical systems, and then assume the identity of one of the alien workers. Her modified combat suit could mimic hegemony body signatures well enough to fool automated scanners. The most dangerous part was the docking procedure. If platform security detected anything unusual about the supply ship, they would destroy it without hesitation. Mira had to perfectly imitate alien piloting techniques while navigating through multiple layers of defensive systems. She succeeded by exploiting the aliens' own arrogance. The hegemony believed their technology was superior to anything humans possessed. When the supply ship's transponder codes checked out and the cargo manifest matched their records, they assumed everything was normal. They never suspected that a human phantom was hiding in their own supply containers. Once aboard the platform, Mira faced her greatest challenge yet. The installation housed over 3,000 hegemony personnel, all of them trained soldiers with access to advanced weapons and armor. Unlike her previous missions, there was nowhere to run if her cover was blown. She began by studying the platform's internal layout and security protocols. Moving through maintenance areas and service tunnels, Mira mapped every corridor and identified the locations of critical systems. The aliens had built their fortress to be impregnable from outside attack, but they had paid less attention to internal security. Her first targets were the platform's senior officers, but she had to eliminate them in ways that would not immediately raise alarms. A commander who died in his sleep from apparent heart failure was unfortunate but not suspicious. An officer who fell down a maintenance shaft during routine inspection was clearly an accident. Over the course of 2 weeks, Mira systematically eliminated the platform's entire command structure without firing a single shot. She used environmental hazards, equipment malfunctions, and carefully staged accidents to remove every officer above the rank of lieutenant. To the remaining crew, it appeared as though their installation was cursed. The psychological impact was devastating. Hegemony soldiers began refusing duty assignments in critical areas of the platform. Some claimed to see ghostly figures in the corridors at night. Others reported equipment moving by itself or strange sounds coming from empty rooms. Discipline began to break down as fear took hold of even the most veteran troops. Captain Lee Dong-jun monitored the situation from the Alliance fleet positioned at the edge of the star system. Intercepted communications from the platform revealed a military unit on the edge of complete collapse. Work schedules were abandoned as crews huddled together in common areas, afraid to venture into isolated sections of the installation. But Mira's masterpiece was yet to come. Having eliminated the command structure, she turned her attention to the platform's primary mission, coordinating hegemony fleet movements throughout the sector. The aliens used an advanced quantum computer system to process tactical data and generate battle plans for their entire military operation. Infiltrating the computer center required all of her skills in stealth and electronic warfare. The facility was protected by multiple layers of security, including biometric scanners calibrated for hegemony physiology. But Mira had spent weeks studying the patterns of authorized personnel. learning their habits and identifying opportunities for infiltration. She entered the computer center during a shift change, when security protocols were momentarily relaxed to allow for personnel rotation. Moving like a shadow through corridors filled with alien technology, she reached the central processing unit without triggering a single alarm. Instead of simply destroying the computer system, Mira made subtle modifications to its programming. The changes would not be detected by routine diagnostics, but they would gradually corrupt the tactical data being generated for hegemony fleet operations. Enemy ships would receive flawed navigation coordinates, incorrect target assessments, and compromised strategic analyses. The sabotage was designed to unfold slowly over several months, creating a cascade of military failures that would appear to be the result of human tactical superiority, rather than internal sabotage. By the time the aliens discovered the true cause, their entire military campaign would be in ruins. Dr. Park Hee-jin studied the broader implications of phantom operations from her research facility on Luna. Her analysis suggested that humanity had discovered a form of warfare that leveraged their natural advantages against species that relied on rigid hierarchical structures and predictable behavioral patterns. The hegemony's greatest strength had become their greatest weakness. Their disciplined military culture made them vulnerable to psychological warfare, while their advanced technology created dependencies that could be exploited by creative thinking. Humans had turned the aliens' own sophistication against them. As Mira prepared for extraction from the orbital platform, reports arrived of similar successes across the galaxy. On Tau Ceti, phantom operatives had infiltrated a hegemony military academy and eliminated an entire graduating class of future officers. The aliens had closed the facility indefinitely, crippling their ability to train new leadership. The extraction itself was almost anticlimactic. With the platform's command structure in ruins and its security protocols compromised, Mira simply walked aboard another supply ship and departed the same way she had arrived. The remaining hegemony personnel were too demoralized and confused to maintain effective security procedures. Behind her, the orbital defense platform continued to function as a military installation, but it was now a hollow shell, commanded by junior officers who were afraid of their own shadows. Within weeks, the facility would be abandoned as the hegemony pulled back from the entire star system. The silent phantom had achieved something that entire battle fleets could not accomplish. Through patience, creativity, and psychological warfare, she had neutralized the enemy's most advanced defensive installation without firing a shot in anger. The war was far from over, but the balance of power had shifted dramatically in humanity's favor. 6 months after the orbital platform incident, Mira found herself deeper in enemy territory than any human had ever ventured. Her new mission had taken her to the heart of hegemony space, to their primary military academy on the fortress world of Keth Prime. This was where the alien empire trained its future leaders, and where Mira would strike the most devastating blow yet in humanity's shadow war. General Park Hee-jin had personally briefed her on the mission parameters. Intelligence suggested that the hegemony military was already showing signs of severe strain from phantom operations. Their officer corps was experiencing unprecedented resignation rates, and many promising candidates were refusing promotions rather than accept leadership positions that seemed to carry a death sentence. The journey to Keth Prime had taken 3 months, traveling in a captured hegemony merchant vessel with forged identification codes. Mira had spent the voyage learning to perfectly imitate alien behavior patterns, studying their language until she could speak it without accent, and memorizing the cultural details that would allow her to blend in with academy personnel. The military academy was a massive complex built into the side of a mountain range that stretched across an entire continent. Thousands of future officers trained there at any given time, learning the tactical doctrines and leadership principles that had allowed the hegemony to conquer dozens of species. It was the beating heart of their military machine. Mira's cover identity was that of a maintenance worker assigned to the Academy's environmental systems. The position gave her access to virtually every area of the complex, while remaining invisible to most of the staff and students. Maintenance personnel were considered beneath notice by the proud alien military caste. Her first weeks were spent mapping the Academy's layout and identifying key targets. The alien institution operated on rigid schedules that made surveillance relatively easy. Students and instructors followed the same routines day after day. providing Mira with countless opportunities to study their habits and plan her strikes. The challenge was not in eliminating individual targets, but in doing so without detection. Unlike her previous missions where fear and confusion had been acceptable outcomes, this operation required absolute stealth. If the Academy's leadership discovered they were under attack, they would implement security measures that could trap Mira on the planet, with no hope of escape. She began with the Academy's most senior instructors, the veterans who taught advanced tactical theory to future generals and admirals. These aliens represented decades of military experience and strategic knowledge. Their loss would create a gap in the hegemony's institutional memory that might never be filled. The first elimination appeared to be a tragic accident. An elderly instructor suffered what seemed to be a fatal heart attack while reviewing student examinations in his private office. The Academy's medical staff found nothing suspicious, attributing his death to the stress of training the next generation of military leaders. Over the following weeks, more instructors began dying from apparent natural causes or accidents. A tactical warfare specialist fell down a flight of stairs after working late in the strategy center. A logistics expert was electrocuted when a faulty power coupling failed in his laboratory. A communications instructor died from food poisoning after eating at the Academy's officer dining facility. The deaths were spaced out carefully to avoid detection, each one separated by enough time to seem like isolated incidents. Mira used her knowledge of alien physiology and the Academy's internal systems to create scenarios that appeared completely natural to investigators. Commander Yoon Taiwan monitored hegemony communications from his position with the Deep Space Reconnaissance Fleet. The reports he intercepted revealed growing concern among Academy leadership about the unusual number of instructor deaths. But no one suspected sabotage. The aliens attributed the losses to age, stress, and the unfortunate coincidences that sometimes occurred in large institutions. But Mira's greatest achievement was yet to come. Intelligence had identified a special graduation ceremony scheduled for the Academy's most promising students, future commanders who were destined for important positions throughout the hegemony military. Eliminating this group would cripple alien leadership for an entire generation. The ceremony was held in the Academy's Grand Auditorium, a massive hall that could accommodate thousands of attendees. Security was tight, with multiple scanning systems and armed guards positioned throughout the facility. The alien leadership considered the event so important that they had invited senior officials from across their empire to attend. Mira had spent months preparing for this moment. She had carefully modified the auditorium's environmental systems, introducing subtle changes that would not be detected by routine inspections. Gas delivery systems were rerouted, air filtration was compromised, and emergency protocols were sabotaged in ways that would only become apparent during an actual crisis. The graduation ceremony began with traditional hegemony military pageantry. Hundreds of future officers marched in formation, while their families and superiors looked on with pride. The Academy's highest-ranking officials delivered speeches about duty, honor, and the destiny of their species to rule the galaxy. Mira watched from her position in the environmental control room, her finger poised over the activation controls for her carefully prepared trap. She had timed everything perfectly, waiting for the moment when the maximum number of targets would be present and the emergency response systems would be unable to function effectively. When she triggered the modified atmospheric systems, the effects were swift and silent. A colorless, odorless gas began circulating through the auditorium's ventilation network, reaching every corner of the massive hall within minutes. The compound was specifically designed to target hegemony physiology while being harmless to human biology. The aliens began collapsing without warning or apparent cause. Students, instructors, and visiting dignitaries simply fell unconscious where they stood, their nervous systems shutting down as the specially formulated agent took effect. Within 20 minutes, the graduation ceremony had become a mass casualty event unlike anything in hegemony history. The Academy's emergency response teams arrived to find hundreds of bodies scattered throughout the auditorium. Medical personnel worked frantically to identify the cause of the mass collapse, but their diagnostic equipment found no traces of conventional toxins or biological agents. To them, it appeared as though some unknown plague had struck down the IE, flower of their military leadership, Colonel Nam Yunseo received the mission success confirmation through encrypted channels while commanding Alliance forces in the Centauri sector, the psychological impact of the Academy massacre would extend far beyond the immediate casualties. Every parent in hegemony space would think twice before allowing their children to pursue military careers. Mira's extraction from Keth Prime required all of her skills in stealth and deception. With the Academy under quarantine and the planet's security forces in a state of high alert, leaving undetected seemed almost impossible. But she had planned for this contingency, preparing multiple escape routes and backup identities. She departed the planet aboard a medical transport vessel, disguised as one of the alien doctors responding to the Academy crisis. The ship carried samples of the supposed plague that had struck the graduation ceremony, specimens that hegemony scientists would study for years without ever discovering their true nature. As her transport left Keth Prime's gravity well, Mira reflected on the broader implications of her mission. The hegemony's military academy would never fully recover from the graduation ceremony massacre. An entire generation of future leaders had been eliminated in a single stroke, creating a leadership gap that would weaken their empire for decades to come. The silent phantom had struck at the very heart of enemy territory and emerged victorious. But her work was far from finished, and the galaxy would soon learn the true price of threatening human civilization. The peace treaty was signed aboard Starbase Unity, a neutral space station positioned at the border between human and hegemony territories. Admiral Song Mi-hyun watched the ceremony with a mixture of satisfaction and amazement. 2 years ago, the mighty hegemony had seemed unstoppable, poised to sweep across human space like a galactic plague. Now their representatives were agreeing to terms that heavily favored the alliance. Captain Lee Dongjun served as one of the diplomatic attachés during the negotiations. He had watched the Phantom program evolve from a desperate military experiment into the most effective weapon in humanity's arsenal. The psychological warfare had succeeded beyond every projection, turning the aliens' own strengths against them in ways that conventional military doctrine had never imagined. The final phase of operations had begun 6 months earlier when Mira broadcast her ultimatum through hijacked hegemony communication networks. Speaking in perfect alien dialect, she had delivered a simple message that shook their empire to its foundations: cease all military operations against human colonies, or face the continued attention of Earth's phantom operatives. The broadcast had been accompanied by detailed intelligence files on every major hegemony installation across 17 star systems. The information was so comprehensive and accurate that alien security experts immediately realized their defenses had been completely compromised. If the Phantoms could gather such detailed intelligence, they could act on it. General Park Hee-jin filed her final report on the Phantom program from Alliance Special Operations Headquarters. Her conclusions painted a picture of warfare revolution that would change military thinking for generations. Humanity had discovered that psychological dominance could be more effective than technological superiority, especially against species with rigid social structures. The hegemony delegation at the peace talks consisted entirely of junior officers and civilian administrators. Most of their senior military leadership was either dead or had resigned their positions rather than live under constant threat of phantom assassination. The few remaining veterans were too traumatized by years of invisible warfare to function effectively as negotiators. Mira herself remained absent from the peace ceremony, having already moved on to her next assignment. Intelligence reports suggested that 3 other hostile species were observing the human hegemony conflict with growing interest. The Korthak Confederacy had begun massing fleets near human territory, while the Zephyrian Empire was reportedly developing new weapons specifically designed to counter human tactics. The Phantom program had been expanded and refined based on lessons learned during the hegemony campaign. New operatives were being trained at secret facilities throughout Alliance space, each one specializing in different aspects of psychological warfare and deep penetration missions. The curriculum now included detailed studies of alien psychology, advanced camouflage techniques, and innovative sabotage methods. Dr. An Ji-young published her comprehensive analysis of phantom operations in the classified Journal of Military Psychology. Her research revealed that the program's success stemmed from exploiting fundamental weaknesses in hierarchical command structures. Species that relied on rigid chains of authority were particularly vulnerable to decapitation strikes that removed key leadership figures. The peace treaty itself was a masterpiece of diplomatic leverage. The hegemony agreed to withdraw from all contested territories, pay substantial reparations for war damages, and provide detailed intelligence about other potentially hostile species. In exchange, the alliance promised to cease phantom operations against hegemony targets and respect their remaining territorial boundaries. But perhaps the most significant clause in the treaty was the creation of a joint commission for monitoring compliance. The hegemony would be required to provide regular reports on their military activities, allowing human intelligence services to track any potential threats. Before they could develop into serious problems, Colonel Nam Yun-seo coordinated the post-war intelligence operations from her new position as director of Phantom Program Expansion. Her mission was to identify other species that might pose threats to human space and develop specialized tactics for dealing with each potential enemy. The success against the hegemony had proven that psychological warfare could level the playing field against technologically superior opponents. The cultural impact of the Phantom campaign extended far beyond military circles. Throughout human space, recruitment for special operations units increased by 400% as young volunteers sought to follow in Mira's footsteps. Military academies developed new courses in psychological warfare, stealth operations, and alien psychology. But the most profound change was in how other species viewed humanity. Before the Phantom campaign, humans had been seen as just another aggressive species seeking territorial expansion through conventional military force. The systematic dismantling of hegemony leadership had revealed something far more dangerous. Humanity was not simply another warrior race. They were creative predators who could analyze their enemies' weaknesses and develop innovative tactics to exploit them. They fought wars with weapons that their opponents could not even comprehend, turning strength into vulnerability and advantage into liability. The galactic intelligence networks buzzed with reports about human capabilities that bordered on the supernatural. Stories spread of phantom operatives who could walk through solid walls, appear in multiple locations simultaneously, and kill with a touch. Most of these tales were wild exaggerations, but they served humanity's strategic interests by creating an aura of invincibility around their special forces. Commander Yoon Tae-won established the new Phantom training facility on a classified world in the Vega system. The installation would serve as the primary academy for humanity's next generation of psychological warfare specialists. Students would learn not just combat techniques, but also alien psychology, cultural analysis, and the art of creating fear through uncertainty. The first class of trainees included representatives from every major human colony, each one selected for their exceptional skills in stealth, marksmanship, and psychological manipulation. They would form the core of an expanded Phantom program designed to maintain galactic peace through the threat of invisible retaliation. Mira's personal legend continued to grow long after the war's end. Intelligence reports from across the galaxy spoke of Phantom sightings in the most unlikely places, usually coinciding with the mysterious deaths of hostile leaders or the sabotage of aggressive military operations. Whether these incidents involved the original Silent Phantom or her trained successors remained classified information. The War Crimes Tribunal that convened after the peace treaty reached a unanimous verdict on Phantom operations. All targets had been legitimate military personnel engaged in active hostilities against human colonies. The psychological impact, while severe, was deemed a natural consequence of the aliens' own command structure vulnerabilities and tactical decisions. As Admiral Song Mi-hyun reviewed the final casualty reports, she reflected on the true cost of the Phantom campaign. Fewer than 200 human operatives had participated in the program, compared to millions of conventional soldiers who had fought in traditional battles. Yet their impact had been decisive in ending a war that could have lasted for decades. The Silent Phantom had become more than just a soldier or even a symbol. She represented humanity's refusal to accept defeat, their willingness to adapt and innovate in the face of seemingly impossible odds. In the vast darkness of space, the shadow of the Ghost still moved, protecting human colonies and maintaining peace through the simple threat of her presence. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity. They were not just another species to be conquered or contained. They were survivors who would find a way to win, no matter what advantages their enemies might possess. The Phantom program had proven that creativity and determination could triumph over superior numbers and advanced technology. Mira had become immortal, not through technology or supernatural intervention, but through the power of fear itself. Her legend would continue to protect human space long after she retired from active service, a fitting legacy for humanity's greatest silent warrior.